Some women enter a man's life like a whisper, soft, unnoticed, almost invisible. They don't demand attention. They don't chase. They don't try to be unforgettable. And yet, something about them lingers. She wasn't the one he planned to fall for. In fact, she wasn't even supposed to matter. She was just an escape, a safe space he stumbled into when the weight of his own life became too heavy. He went to her not to love her, but to breathe. And yet, in that space between pretending and feeling nothing, something cracked. Because sometimes, the woman you thought would be your silence ends up being the one who teaches you how to listen to your soul. He never told her how much he needed her presence. He came to her like a man passing through. But there was something in the way she listened, in how she didn't ask for anything but offered everything. Not with words, but with stillness, attention, truth. She never asked him to choose. She never asked him to stay. And maybe that's why her absence burned even deeper than her presence ever did. Because for the first time, he felt what it was like to be fully seen, without judgment, without masks. Carl Jung once said that people will do anything, no matter how absurd, to avoid facing their own soul. And that's what he was doing. Using her as a distraction, a break from a life he didn't know how to escape. But in trying to avoid himself, he ran straight into her. And she reflected back everything he wasn't ready to see. She wasn't perfect. She had her fears. She doubted if any of it meant anything to him. She cried alone after he left, wondering why she opened her heart to someone who was never fully hers. But she loved him in a way that left a mark. She didn't try to fix him. She just stood there, steady, as he fell apart. And in doing so, she became the mirror he couldn't break. The one that showed him who he truly was beneath the performance. It wasn't lust that lingered. It wasn't the secrecy that made it unforgettable. It was the depth, the kind of emotional nakedness he never shared with anyone else. He was married to someone else, committed by law, by routine, by story, but he belonged to no one emotionally, not even to himself. Until her, he started to notice it when he was away from her, when he was lying next to someone else but felt a quiet ache, a memory of safety, of breath, of peace. He told himself it was nothing, that he was just tired, that she was just a phase, but the truth kept growing louder inside of him. He hadn't found an escape. He had found himself, and it terrified him. She didn't fight for him. She let him go, not out of weakness, but out of self-respect. She knew she wasn't born to be someone's break from reality. She was meant to be a world of her own. And even though he walked away, deep down he knew she was the only real thing he had touched in years. This is the part no one tells you about. The part where the woman who was never supposed to matter becomes unforgettable. Where the man, despite every effort to stay numb, feels more in her silence than he ever did in all the noise of his daily life. And suddenly, it's not about her being his escape. It's about her being the door he was too afraid to walk through. Some women don't come to complete a man. They come to reveal how incomplete he's been all along. She didn't rescue him. She reminded him that he was worth rescuing. And that awakening doesn't happen in the perfect marriage or the planned life. It happens in those rare moments when the soul is touched unexpectedly and deeply. She will move on. Not because she didn't care, but because she finally cared. Enough for herself. She will grow into a life where her love is no longer borrowed, where her value isn't hidden in shadows. But he will remember, not in regret, not in shame, but in truth. Because when a man meets a woman who was never trying to be loved, but simply stood in love, he never forgets. And that is how she became the one thing he never meant to keep, but could never replace. He will go on living, of course. Men always. Do they go back to their routines, to their responsibilities, to the structures that make them feel safe? But some nights are different. Some silences are louder. And in those moments, her presence returns like a memory he didn't ask for, but can't turn off. Not her body, not her voice, but her essence. The way she held space for him to be human. The way she never needed him to explain anything, yet understood everything. That kind of connection doesn't die. It just waits in the quiet corners of his mind, whispering truths he once buried. He may try to replicate it, seek it in others. Test the waters with women who are easier, less complex, more available, but it won't feel the same. Not because they're not worthy, but because they're not her. Because they didn't meet him in his chaos and love him without asking for a mask. They didn't see his soul before he even knew it was there. And no matter how much he tries to forget, his nervous system remembers her. His body knows the calm she brought, and that knowledge doesn't leave. Meanwhile, she will heal. Slowly, quietly, not because she's weak, but because she has chosen to grow, rather than cling. She cry at times. Yes, she missed the version of herself that bloomed in his presence, but she also began to realize something profound. That what she gave wasn't wasted. That love offered with truth is never a mistake. It's a seed, and even if it didn't grow in his garden, it will bloom in hers. She was not born to be a chapter in someone else's confusion. She was born to be the whole book in a story that honors her. And though he may never return, though he may never speak the words she longed to hear, he'll carry her in places even he can't name. Because you cannot unfeel awakening. You cannot undo the moment you were truly seen. Carl Jung spoke of the anima, the feminine presence within every man that holds his deepest feelings, longings, and unconscious truths. And sometimes, a real woman walks into a man's life and touches that inner anima so deeply that he is forced to face everything he's been running from. That's what she was. Not a fantasy, not a lover, but the mirror of his soul. And in the end, it doesn't matter that they didn't end up together. It doesn't matter that the world never knew their story. What matters is that it changed them both. That for a moment, in a world full of masks, they were real. And being real, even just once, even with someone who wasn't yours to keep, is more powerful than living a whole life pretending. Before we go deeper, here's something that might change how you see all of this. If you've ever been the woman who awakened something in a man who was never truly yours, the Jung Method can help you understand why your depth was never a mistake. The link is pinned in the first comment. He may never admit it out loud, not even to himself. But deep within, he knows she changed something in him. She disrupted the sleep he mistook for peace. She didn't scream to be heard, didn't beg to be seen. Her stillness said everything, and in that stillness, he felt seen in a way that stripped him bare. It wasn't lust, it wasn't the thrill of secrecy. It was something ancient, something sacred, the kind of energy that doesn't come often, and when it does, it leaves fingerprints on your spirit. Men like him don't always understand what they've touched until it's gone. They think they're in control, that they can compartmentalize, that emotion can be delayed or denied. But the soul doesn't follow logic. It stores what matters. It remembers what was real. And when she walked away, she didn't just leave a space behind. She left a frequency that no one else could match. A knowing that no matter how full his life looked from the outside, there would always be something missing now. For her, it wasn't easy to leave. She carried love like a quiet fire. She wanted to stay, not out of need, but out of devotion. But devotion without respect becomes self-betrayal. She had to choose herself, not because she stopped loving him, but because loving him was slowly making her forget her own worth. And choosing herself didn't mean she stopped feeling. It meant she finally honored her own soul as much as she had once honored his. What most people never see is the cost of being the woman who awakens a man. It's not glamorous. It's not a love story with a bow on top. It's messy. It's lonely. It's filled with doubt, because you feel everything he won't say, everything he represses. You hold space for his transformation, and when it starts to break him open, he often runs. Not because he doesn't feel it, but because he feels it too much. And sometimes, the weight of awakening is too much for the one being awakened. She didn't ask for that role. She didn't want to be a turning point in someone else's life. She just wanted to love, to be loved back, to feel safe. But the universe uses souls like hers to shake people from their sleep. And once that role is complete, she's left to gather herself, to pick up the pieces of her own heart while he walks away changed and silent. But that silence says more than words ever could. It echoes, it lingers, it hums in his bones when he least expects it. When he's driving alone, when he hears a song that sounds like her laugh, when he's holding someone else but wishing he felt more. He may look like he's moved on, but something inside him still sits in that moment where she held his truth and didn't flinch. There are men who fall in love with safety, with order, with expectation, and there are men who accidentally meet a woman who doesn't fit any mold, a woman who disrupts his patterns just by being herself. That kind of woman is unforgettable, not because she tried to be, but because she simply couldn't be anything less than real. And maybe he'll never tell her. Maybe he'll stay in the life he chose. But the next time he looks in the mirror and wonders why something feels different, it won't be age or stress. It will be her, the one who left, but left him more awake than he ever was before. She didn't return to ask for closure. She didn't need to. Closure wasn't a conversation. It wasn't a final text or a moment of clarity handed to her. Closure came the day she chose to stop explaining herself to someone who could never meet her at the depths she lived in. She stopped needing him to validate what they had, because some connections don't need confirmation. They live in the nervous system, in the heart, in the places where logic can't reach. And she understood, finally, that what they shared didn't have to end with understanding. It ended when she reclaimed her peace. There was a time when she thought he would wake up beside her, when she imagined a version of reality where he would choose the path that aligned with their souls. But love, when it's pure, doesn't beg to be chosen. It just is. And the tragedy wasn't that he didn't love her. The tragedy was that he didn't know how to love himself enough to let her love reach him. Because to receive love like hers, a man has to be willing to dismantle the walls he's built for a lifetime. He has to let go of the versions of himself that feel safe but suffocating. He has to risk being naked emotionally, spiritually, psychologically, and many men aren't ready for that, not because they're heartless, but because they're afraid. And fear disguised as comfort is what keeps them stuck in lives they don't fully want, with people they no longer feel, and in stories they've outgrown. She was the fire he thought he could control, but fires don't ask permission to burn. She lit up something in him that had long been asleep. She wasn't a detour, she was the crossroad, and he knew it. That's why he pulled back. That's why he disappeared when it got too real. Because when a man sees a woman who reflects back his unlived life, he either steps into it or he runs, and most run. Not because they don't want her, but because they're not ready to become the man she sees in them. But she didn't stay. Frozen in that moment, she let the pain wash through her. She allowed the grief to do its work. She didn't numb herself with distractions or pretend she was fine. She felt it all. The betrayal, the silence, the longing, and in feeling it, she found herself again, not the version of her that needed his love, but the one who remembered she was whole even before he showed up. And that's the irony. While he was her mirror for a short time, she became her own anchor. She no longer needed to be someone's secret sanctuary. She became the home she was always trying to offer him. She learned that love isn't about sacrifice without boundaries. It's about presence, integrity, and staying true to yourself even when your heart is broken. The awakening wasn't just his, it was hers too. Because in the end, she realized the love she gave him wasn't meant to be returned. It was meant to reveal her own capacity to feel deeply, to heal deeply, and to rise beyond circumstances that tried to shrink her. He may never say thank you, he may never look back, but her soul knows. She was the lesson, the lightning, the truth he didn't expect. And while he goes back to a life that fits him on paper but not in spirit, she walks into a future that may be unknown, but is undeniably hers. A future built on self-respect, on emotional honesty, and on the unshakable truth that she was never too much. She was only ever too real for someone who wasn't ready.